Professor of Economics James Foster has created a new theory to measure poverty. Life is more than just income, and countries have been using income as a source of measure, but that's changed. It's gone way beyond that. It's gone into what we call deprivation, how people are feeling. Are they happy? Are they joyful? I paint roses because the rose speaks the language of the heart. In this painting, I have painted the equation on poverty as the stem. Perhaps people will look at it and be interested enough to want to understand, or perhaps it will just be subliminal. Whatever it is, it's a hidden code. Please, end starvation in this world. We can, you know.
Well, conventionally, poverty has been measured focusing on income or consumption. And this, in a U.S. environment, would be the number of dollars that a family has available to buy things, or the number of dollars they use to buy things. But the purchase behavior of a family is just part of the defining characteristic of poverty. Because if a family has very low education, or a family has poor health, or an individual has poor health, or if the environment is very bad for living, such as sanitation facilities are terrible, this can be as important as having low income. So what we do in our multidimensional poverty measure is take into account additional dimensions that directly affect people's well-being. Income is interesting because it's a means to an end, not the end themselves. We begin with several dimensions of well-being, and we ask what would constitute being deprived in that dimension. So you have a deprivation level, a cutoff for every dimension, and then we look at the range of deprivations that a person experiences, and if they are deprived enough, in other words, they have enough dimensions in which they're deprived, we consider them to be poor. What's interesting about this index is that we're really presenting a framework for others to use, and we've called it open source framework or open source technology, that a country or even an NGO or a big agency like USAID can adopt as a way of taking into account the various dimensions that are important for them to take into account. And so who determines the dimensions? Well, the user. It may be people in a village that say, we think these are the important dimensions to take into account. And then it may be that they would be able to determine cutoffs and say, we think that someone is poor who doesn't have this or is in this situation. What's interesting about it is that there's a final type of cutoff, and that's the determination of who is actually poor. That can be done at the local level, but it could also be done at a higher level, reflecting the realities of limited budgets. So here's the deprivations, here are the numbers of deprivations that different people have. Well, over here we might say that you're poor if you have 5 or 10 deprivations, higher if it's more lenient at the local level. It could be more restrictive at the upper level to reflect the actual budgetary exigencies. So the flexibility of it is pretty amazing, and it can be used in a variety of circumstances, allowing people who are being affected by this to be part of the process by which poverty is measured, determined, and policies are then developed.
To us, gross national happiness basically means that ultimately the long-term and the ultimate goal of development should be happiness, that the people should be happy. And Bhutan believes that this happiness cannot come from purely material development, economic development, but that it must be very carefully balanced with spiritual health, with the environment, and generally the quality of life.
I have spent the past 4 years considering the nature of happiness in the material and spiritual world. There are so many ways for an artist to represent pain, sadness, and deprivation. How would one capture happiness? We have clinical depression, tangible poverty, and absolute distraction. Our worst impulses are very codified. What about happiness? How do we arrive at it? Measure it? Capture it? Perhaps it's just better to feel it. My work attempts to do so. My work is not designed to be challenging, but rather encouraging. I want people to feel their happiness while they think about how happiness manifests in our culture. I use symbols that are simple conventions: roses for love, birds for freedom, and Buddha for serenity, and combine them in ways that are meant to evoke joy. James's work deconstructs happiness mathematically, while mine aims to capture it viscerally. The interesting thing is the tension between the two. What I want to get to is something both universal and personal, symbolic and literal, but above all, beautiful.
Jeno lama jeno chinle la nubo la jeno jeno lama jeno jeno lama la jeno jeno lama jeno Sanga la tenzin la jeno. Compassion is, brings happiness to the beings, and happiness also is important to recognize recognize or realize how you're and satisfied how you are. And also, if you don't recognize, and then even if you're poor or rich, doesn't matter. If you're rich, still sufferings. You're poor, of course, suffering, But sometimes, if you're poor, still happy. How to realize what you are. If you realize, then you're already happiness. Yeah. Lama kino lama la kino lama la kino tenzin la jamsu la kino lama la kino Keno lama la keno lama la keno Jinjin lama la keno